The silence shattered. The siren's wail cut through the evening like a blade, loud, relentless, piercing the heavy silence of the pine woods. Ava froze mid-step, her hand clutching the chisel she'd been using to carve a nameplate for her cabin. Her heart hammered against her ribs, each beat echoing like a drum in her ears. It was a sound she hadn't heard since she first wired the alarm system, back when the cabin was still a home, a sanctuary. But this wasn't just a warning. This was a breach, a betrayal. Her fingers tightened around the chisel, then suddenly loosened. The noise was deafening, almost as if the woods themselves had been shattered. She stared at the darkening trees, trying to process what she was hearing. For a moment she thought about Mark, the man who had built this place with his own hands, his laugh echoing through the rafters, their nights spent whispering hopes beneath the stars. No, this wasn't just a siren. It was a cry of intrusion, of invasion. Her breath quickened. Without thinking, she dropped the chisel, its metal clattering onto the workbench, and broke into a sprint. Her boots, still unlaced, caught on the uneven porch floor as she pushed out the door into the chilling dusk. The cold wind whipped her hair into her face, but her focus was fixed ahead. She needed to see. Had someone been here? Had they crossed the boundary of her sacred space? When she reached the crest of the hill overlooking her retreat, she paused, lungs heaving from cold and fear. The siren's scream had stopped, replaced by a sudden hush. A heavy stillness filled the air, broken only by the rustling of the wind and the distant cry of an owl. Her eyes darted across the porch, a porch she'd stained herself, a space marked by love and sweat. The porch lights flickered, casting long, strange shadows. Then she saw it, the tracks, tire marks in the gravel, fresh enough to still steam in the evening air. Someone had been here, not long ago. She stared, heart pounding, as her mind raced, to understand. Who? Why? Her stomach twisted. The last thing she wanted was to believe it, but the evidence was clear. Someone had entered her sanctuary and left. And they'd gone, left her with the echo of footsteps and the faint smell of gasoline. A cold wave swept over her. She crept forward, every step cautious, her eyes scanning the darkened cabin. The wind carried a faint hum, a distant, unsettling whisper. She reached the door and hesitated. Her hand hovered over the handle. For a moment she thought about calling the sheriff, but she knew that might be useless, especially if whoever was here was still nearby. Instead, she moved to the side where a small camera was hidden beneath the eaves, its lens pointed toward the gravel. She reached behind the panel and pulled out the tablet she'd secretly installed months ago. Her trembling fingers navigated to the footage, her only record of what had happened. The screen flickered to life, and there she was, Karen, the woman who had been a thorn in her side for months. Clipboard in hand, a smug grin plastered across her face. She was walking into the cabin like she owned it, like she had every right. Ava's breath hitched. She watched in horror as Karen stepped over the threshold, her fingers brushing over the antique shelf Mark had built. The violation wasn't just physical. She could feel it, like a wound opening inside her soul. Karen's footsteps wandered, inside as if she belonged, touching furniture that was sacred as if she had the right to trample on memories. Ava sank onto the nearby bench, her mind spinning. The footage showed Karen's confident stride, her smug expression. But what she didn't see was what Karen had taken, what she'd touched, or what she'd left behind. Her phone buzzed suddenly, an unheard voicemail. She hesitated, then pressed play. Karen's voice, cheerful and false. "Hi, Ava, just checking in. Took a quick walk up to your cabin, making sure everything's in order. Hope you don't mind. There's been some chatter about zoning issues, you know how it is. Just being neighborly." Ava's grip tightened around her phone. The word neighbor felt like a joke. She had no neighbors, no community. Since Mark died, she'd withdrawn, buried herself in silence and grief. She'd stopped replying to the HOA, stopped going to meetings, stopped caring about their rules. But Karen? She had no boundaries. The quiet was shattered again by her own rising anger. How dare she? How dare Karen invade her space, her memories? Her eyes flicked to the rug, skewed, out of place. Someone had been inside. Someone had been here, and now they'd left, leaving behind only whispers and footprints. She moved into the bedroom where her hand traced the stitched quilt Mark and she had made. Karen had been here, walking where Mark had whispered goodnight. That thought made her fists clench. The violation was deeper than a simple trespass. It was a theft of her peace, her memories, her love. In her mind, she saw Mark's face, sick, weak, but still smiling, whispering words of hope. She remembered the nights they spent watching the stars, the quiet promises they made. Now, all of that was tainted. Her fingers brushed the edge of the quilt, then reached into the hidden drawer beneath the stairs. Inside was a small black box, the cabin surveillance backup. Mark's meticulous planning had preserved every moment, every visitor, every intrusion. She inserted the drive into her laptop, her hands trembling with fury. The footage revealed Karen's entry, deliberate, brazen. She tripped the motion sensor at 2:43 p.m., entered through the back door, and moved freely inside. No effort to hide, no attempt at stealth. She was confident, entitled. Ava's mind hardened. Karen wasn't just petty, she was dangerous, and she'd crossed a line that could never be erased. She made a call to the sheriff. The deputy sounded cautious but supportive. Karen was still on the county's planning board, which meant enforcement might be slow, but that didn't matter. Ava had her own plans. She would not confront Karen directly. Not yet. Instead, she would prepare. She would gather evidence, strengthen her defenses, and turn her cabin into a fortress of truth. That night, Ava sat in the dim glow of her old fireplace, Mark's notebook open in her lap. She read his favorite quote: "A storm is only as dangerous as the fool who thinks it's not coming." She whispered the words into the darkness, feeling their weight settle deep in her heart. She wasn't just waiting anymore. She was ready, and the storm, the real storm, was coming. Would you like me to continue with a chapter 2? Now, absolutely. Here's a powerful, long, and engaging continuation that dives straight into the action without any typical setup, starting from the end of the previous chapter. It's crafted to keep the suspense high with simple, impactful language, plenty of twists, and a gripping flow. The moment Karen stepped inside, the alarm erupted, an ear-splitting shriek that tore through the cabin's walls like a storm. Karen froze, eyes wide with shock, hands instinctively covering her ears as the deafening sound bounced off the rafters. She spun around, trying to find an escape, but the door was already locked tight. The cabin's silent guardian had spoken, an invisible wall that she had just crossed. Outside, Ava watched through the mirrored panel. Her heart pounded wildly. She had waited for this moment, prepared for it. Now, with every second ticking by, she knew Karen's arrogance had sealed her fate. Karen's face twisted with panic. She knocked her hands away, frantic, trying to shout over the siren, but her voice was drowned in chaos. Her feet stumbled back as she tried to find her way out, but the cabin's silent trap was set. Every step she took triggered silent sensors. Pressure, plates under the floor, hidden cameras capturing every movement, microphones recording every breath. Ava's fingers hovered over the control panel. She had programmed everything meticulously. Pressure sensors under the porch, near the entrance, along the main walkway. As soon as Karen stepped over the threshold, the system activated. It was too late for apologies now. Karen's eyes darted, wildly, her hands reaching for her phone, but the screen was dead, disconnected from her. She searched desperately for an exit, panic flooding her voice. "Let me out, I didn't mean..." But the door was sealed tight and the alarm's roar refused to stop. The cabin had become her prison. The loudspeaker crackled to life. "Identify yourself." Ava's voice echoed through the dense silence, cold and steady. "You're trespassing. Stay where you are." Karen's face drained of color. She backed away, her hands trembling as she looked around for help, for anyone, anyway, to save her. But no one was coming. Only her reflection in the mirror, distorted by fear. Meanwhile, Ava watched her from behind the wall, her finger poised, over the microphone. Every breath Karen took was recorded, every word captured. The evidence was building, proof of her intrusion, her disrespect. Karen finally screamed, voice cracking. "This is a mistake. I was just—" The alarm cut her off again, piercing and relentless. Karen staggered, clutching her ears, her entire body trembling. Her mind raced for a way out. But she was trapped, caught in her own arrogance, in the very trap she'd set for herself. Ava stepped into the room, calm and deliberate, her face unreadable. She watched Karen's disoriented movements with a strange mix of anger and satisfaction. "You thought you could come here and do as you pleased," Ava said softly, almost whispering. "You thought I was weak, that I'd never fight back. But this is just the beginning." Karen's eyes darted to her, searching for an excuse, a way to escape. But the room was filled with the evidence, the silent witnesses of her trespass, the cameras, the sensors, the recording microphones. "You have no authority here," Ava continued, her voice cold but steady. "This place isn't yours. It's sacred, and I won't let anyone destroy what Mark and I built." Karen's lips trembled as she tried to speak, but her voice was drowned by the relentless siren. Her hands reached out, grabbing at the air, desperate, pleading. "Please, just let me out. I was only—" But Ava pressed a button on her control panel. The screen flickered. A live feed of Karen inside the cabin from multiple angles, time-stamped and crystal clear. The evidence was undeniable. Karen's face contorted in rage. Her eyes flashed with fury as she realized she'd been caught. She tried to lunge forward, but the sensors had already done their job. She stumbled, trying to fight the invisible chains that held her. Outside, Ava took a deep breath. The moment had arrived. She activated the final piece of her plan, an alert that would send an immediate message to her satellite link, a real-time notification. The siren finally cut out, leaving a deafening silence. Karen was left panting, eyes darting around the room, realizing her mistake. She was alone, trapped, and exposed. Ava stepped into the room, her gaze fixed on Karen's trembling form. Her voice was calm, but unwavering. "You crossed a line you can't come back from. I warned you, this is my home, my sanctuary, and I will protect it by any means necessary." Karen's face twisted into a mixture of rage and defeat. She tried to speak, but no words came. Her hands clenched into fists, trembling with fury. "You think this is over?" She spat, voice trembling. "You can't keep me out forever. Someone will come." But Ava shook her head slowly, a faint smile curling on her lips. "No one's coming. Not anymore. Because I've made sure of that. This cabin isn't just wood and nails. It's a fortress. And I'm just getting started." She reached into her pocket and pulled out a remote. With a press of a button, the cabin's security system locked down entirely. All cameras, sensors, and alarms were now under her control. The evidence was safe, stored securely. Karen stared, her face a mask of disbelief. She tried to lunge again, but the door behind her shut with a heavy thud. The lock snapped into place. "Now," Ava said softly, "you're going to stay put until help arrives. And when they do, you'll answer for what you've done." Karen's eyes flickered with a mixture of anger and helplessness. She was caught, trapped, and helpless. Ava stepped back, watching her for a long moment. Her voice was quiet, but full of finality. "This isn't just about this cabin. It's about respect, about boundaries. And you've crossed every single one. Next time, I won't just press a button. I'll make sure you pay for it. Every last penny, every scar you leave." Karen sank to her knees, fists clenched, eyes wild with fury. But she knew. She was beaten. The evidence was there, undeniable. The silent witnesses had spoken. Outside, the woods seemed to hold their breath, waiting for what was coming next. The calm before the storm. Ava turned and slowly walked toward the door. Her steps echoed softly, steady, unshaken. She looked back one last time, her face calm but fierce. She whispered, "This is my home, my sanctuary, and I won't let anyone take that from me again." With that, she opened the door, stepping into the cold night. The woods outside were eerily quiet now, as if they too were listening, waiting for the next move. And Ava knew this was just the beginning. Would you like me to continue with the next chapter? Absolutely. Here is a powerful, long, and gripping ending chapter that dives straight into the action, starting from the very end of the previous story, with simple language, suspense, explosive revelations, twists, and a mind-blowing conclusion. It's crafted to leave a lasting impression. The door slammed shut behind Ava as she stepped into the darkness of the night, her heart pounding like a drum. Every breath she took was sharp and quick, her mind racing to process what she had just done. She had finally done it. The cabin was secure. Karen was trapped, caught in her own trap with no way out. But as she turned away, her eyes caught a faint movement in the shadows, something that sent a cold shiver down her spine. She froze, her blood turning icy. The figure wasn't moving fast, but it was there, lurking just beyond the flickering edges of her vision. It was Karen. No, not Karen. Not anymore. A gasp caught in Ava's throat, because standing there was a different figure altogether. Taller, cloaked in darkness, eyes gleaming with something cold and deadly. It wasn't Karen anymore. It was something else, something twisted, something sinister. Ava's mind refused to accept it at first. But the shape moved closer and she saw it, the faint shimmer of a mask, a shadow of a smile that didn't reach the eyes. It was a face she knew, her own face but distorted, evil, unrecognizable. Her scream choked in her throat as she stumbled backward. Was this a dream? A nightmare? Or had she somehow unleashed a force she couldn't control? The figure stepped forward, voice echoing in her mind, not spoken but felt, deep, guttural, and terrifying. You thought you could hide behind your walls, Ava. You thought you could silence me, but I am always here, inside you. Her knees buckled, the room spun wildly. She clutched her head, trying to block out the voice, the image, the reality. But it was too late. The line between what was real and what wasn't had been erased. Suddenly, the ground beneath her trembled. The cabin shook violently, as if an earthquake had hit, but it was something else, something darker, more violent. The walls cracked open, revealing shadows that slithered and wriggled like living black ink. They poured out, filling the room, suffocating, relentless. Ava screamed as the shadows wrapped around her, pulling her into a void of darkness. Her hands clawed at the air, desperate to escape, but there was no way out. The shadows whispered, terrible secrets, memories she had buried deep, truths she was too afraid to face. And then, amidst the chaos, she saw him, Mark. He was there, standing silent and resolute. His face was calm, but his eyes held a storm. You fought too hard, he said softly. You forgot one thing, Ava. Sometimes the darkness inside us isn't a curse. It's a part of who we are. And it's been waiting all along. His words pierced her like a knife. She reached out toward him, but he was dissolving into the shadows, fading away, leaving only his voice echoing. You can't run from it. You can't hide forever. Sometimes the only way out is through. Ava's scream tore through the night as she woke up, drenched in sweat, her body trembling. The room was silent now, peaceful, but her mind was shattered. Was it a nightmare? A vision? Or had the darkness truly begun to take hold? She looked around her small cabin, the safe walls she'd built to protect herself. Everything seemed normal, until she noticed the mirror. There, in the reflection, was something she hadn't seen before. A faint, shadowy figure behind her, standing just out of sight. Its eyes glinted in the dark, waiting. Her heart pounded again. She spun around, but there was nothing. Only shadows flickering on the walls. She clenched her fists, trying to hold onto her sanity, to remember who she was, but deep inside a voice whispered, soft, deadly, "This isn't over." And she knew, with terrifying certainty, that the true nightmare was only just beginning, because the darkness she had fought so hard to contain was not gone. It had merely been sleeping, waiting for the perfect moment to rise again, and now it had awakened. The forest outside rustled, an ominous whisper carried on the wind. Shadows stretched long and dark, creeping toward her window. If she looked carefully, she could see them gathering, swirling, forming shapes that resembled faces, her face, smiling, mocking, warning. Ava realized the horrifying truth. She was no longer the only one inside her head. The darkness had found a way out. It had bled into her soul, and it was now part of her. She clutched her chest, feeling the cold weight of it. The battle wasn't over. It had just begun, and the final twist hit her like a thunderbolt. The one who had been with her all along, the voice telling her to fight to survive, was not a stranger. It was herself. The darkness inside her wasn't an enemy out there. It was her own reflection, her shadow, her own deepest fears. She whispered to herself, trembling but fierce, "I am the darkness, and I am the light. I will fight. I will survive. And I will win." But deep down, she knew one thing for sure. The war for her soul had only just reached its climax, and the last chapter was still unwritten. Would you like me to craft an even more intense, detailed ending, or add a final twist?